All right. Well,
Up. Bitch, shut the fuck up. Bitch, shut the fuck up. Bitch, shut the fuck up.
Welcome.
okay. Thank you for that. That sometimes happens, but we know how to deal with that. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Um, this now officially afternoon, 12 o'clock UK, 1 o'clock Europe. Welcome to Lunch and Learn, our monthly event for and by space communicators, outreach specialists, marketeers, everyone involved in promoting and communicating space. So again, thank you all for joining us. We're recording this for people who can't join us this afternoon, but want to join us later in the live stream. In the replay, and we also live streaming this on LinkedIn. Um, as the as my background says, I don't know if you can see it. This is a monthly event every last Thursday of the month. Except this month. This is the third Thursday of the month, and that is because of a good reason, because next week, the last Thursday of the month, we have a special event that we're organizing once a year, which is our big space outreach conference, Impulse 2022. So I will mention it again at the end of this episode, but we'd like to invite all of you who have not registered yet to register for Impulse 2022, the annual space outreach conference, the 23rd and 24th of March. Check out our website for all the details. Today the topic is going to be an interesting one, and something that is very near and dear to my heart. That's also why I picked this topic. And it's I've jokingly said on social media, this is about how to communicate and how to engage people for space missions to planet Earth. This is about space analog missions today, and about marketing, communicating, promoting, and talking about the relevance and the importance of space analog missions. So I'm very pleased today to be joined by two specialists in that field. And we'll be talking to both of them about different aspects, I guess, of what space analog missions are, why we do them, but most of all, how we promote them and how we engage people with this probably relatively unknown element of preparing for human space missions. So I would like to introduce you to our speakers. And first of all, Marion Dugue from Chile. Marion, perhaps you can briefly introduce yourself, and then we'll go to Lisa for the next introduction, and then we'll give you the floor to talk a little bit more about your missions.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Indeed, my name is Marion. I'm currently in the Netherlands, but I'm French originally, and I am the project coordinator of Chilice, which is a lunar analog astronaut mission happening in August in Iceland.
Excellent. Well, we can't wait to hear all about that. And our second speaker is Lisa McNamee. And I met Lisa in the SciComm chat a few weeks ago, where she talked. And looking at her Twitter profile, I found the link to the award that she won with a promotion video about space analog missions. So we're really looking forward, Lisa, to hearing about your role in space analog missions and how this award came about. But perhaps you can introduce yourself real quickly.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I have a slightly funny kind of mixed background. I'm a medical doctor in a military context, but prior to medical school, I was a filmmaker. So I made broadcast documentaries for RTE, which is our national broadcaster here in Ireland, and BBC in the UK. So I suppose I'm kind of trying to bring those threads together a little bit around communicating what I find to be the really exciting elements of space, because there are so many people who are really passionate about space, but there's just no information there. There's this huge void. And I love the visual aspect of just telling people about that. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here today.
Brilliant. Well, we'll hear more about that, and perhaps we can post a link to your video somewhere in the chat here. It's also on the website. If you go to powering.space under events, lunch and learn, we posted a link to your award-winning video. But first, if that's okay, Marion, I'd like to learn about Chilice a little bit. So perhaps you can give us the full story about what Chilice is, what it intends to achieve, and most of all, how you communicate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I share my screen for a quick presentation?
Absolutely.
Okay, share screen. Here we go. Can you see my screen?
That works perfectly, yes.
Awesome. Right, because I can't see it, so I'll just trust you on that. Right. So indeed, I'll talk a bit more about chill ice and what it entails. Let me just. So first, a bit who I am. I mean, I briefly mentioned it, of course. I'm currently a student and research assistant at TU Delft. My main interest is in atmospheric sciences. On the side, I'm also very involved with the Space Generation Advisory Council. I don't know if any of you have heard of this before, but it's essentially a young community for young professionals and students related to space. And so within that, I'm involved in finding a way to centralize and standardize analog astronaut missions. And of course, I am project coordinator for Chill Ice for the mission that will happen this summer. So Chill Ice is part of the mother company called ICEE, which is all about the scientific testbed for the future of space exploration. And they had the first campaign last year, which was a proof of concept for an analog astronaut mission in a lava tube in Iceland. And so here you can see a bit of the core company, the core team, including Esther, who's in the call right there. So hi, Esther. So what are actually analog astronaut missions? Just in the audience, could you maybe raise your hands? Who has heard of that before? Who knows what it's about? Right, thank you, Remco. Awesome. So yeah, briefly, analog astronaut missions, it's not a new idea in the sense of it's about testing apparatus and operations used for space exploration on Earth. And this is done, for example, in extreme environments. You can see that with Eden ISS for horticulture. There's rovers and robots being tested in different deserts. But the idea of the analog astronaut mission is this twist on the idea of testing space exploration research on Earth in the context of an astronaut mission. So it's the story around it, which also means that we're testing out spacesuits, human factors, human psychology that astronauts will encounter during space missions. And this is done, there's a bunch all over the world in different areas. There's, of course, Nemo under the sea, which this one is related to the different space agencies. It's a collaboration. Then you have some in Hawaii, you have some in Iceland. There's others in deserts in the US, in Israel, but everywhere. So what's the particularity of Chill Ice? So Chill Ice is actually an acronym for construction of a habitat inside the lunar analog lava tube, quite a mouthful. And then ICE stands for Iceland. And the particularity of this idea is that lava tubes are structures found also on the moon and Mars. And they're interesting because they provide shelter. I don't know if you can hear the sound, but they can find shelter from radiation, from temperature fluctuations, from meteorites and all of this. So it's really important to be able to assess the feasibility of settlements inside lava tubes, because these are potential settlements that will happen on other planets. So this is a lava tube you can find in Iceland, and these are all photos taken from last year's mission. So you can see a bit the scale, and it is essentially a big empty tube where you can indeed set up a habitat. It's very rocky, quite dangerous to enter. So there's a lot of training going behind it. So the 2021 campaign, there was 38 plus people involved, 16 different nationalities, 6 analog astronauts, 2 days covering 2 different missions. And the main research, let me see if that works. Oh, here we go. Oh yeah, and of course that wouldn't be possible. Different partners. We have partners from academia to industry who are able to cover the experiments that we're looking at, but also the logistics and the operations, as well as the outreach. Our main focus of last year was habitat research, rovers. We also had augmented reality, which are very interested for implementation in astronaut helmets, as well as solar panels and lava tube communications. So what are we doing currently? Well, it's the second campaign. So now that we have the proof of concept of last year, we are this time focusing on assessing the long-term settlement. So looking more at the habitat and the technology that needs to be developed and the infrastructure associated to it. Our campaign will happen from the 22nd to the 29th of August. So this is a much longer mission. It will only be one, and we will have a smaller crew of just 3 analog astronauts. And this is currently our team with as many nationalities. We're very multinational, but also very multidisciplinary, which is extremely important for such a mission. And so, yeah, our research focus is geological research, so mapping the lava tube, understanding how it works, the infrastructure, also looking at regenerated life support systems, looking at habitat improvement, and then tech innovation. So looking at rovers, suits, yeah, lava tube communications, and all of that. So this is probably the main focus of this webinar. So the outreach, how are we interacting with the public? We're doing that through different ways. There's academia, of course, participating and publishing papers of our research in different conferences. So this is at the ICEE in Dubai. There's going to be one in Arizona in a few months' time. There's also some outreach with the broader audience, not necessarily scientific, through podcasts. And we also have our exciting pub quiz coming up next week, next Friday. So of course you're all invited for that. So here you go. That's the link for the pub quiz. And also we are opening applications for analog astronauts at the start of April. And yeah, this is essentially it. I'm really looking forward to your questions and your interest related to analog astronaut. So yeah, thank you. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Yes, well, thank you very much, Marion. That's very interesting. I must say, when I learned about Chill Ice, which is not very long ago, actually we met in person at an event a few weeks ago in Noordwijk, where you, well, Esther and you very enthusiastically shared what Chill Ice was. I hadn't really heard about it, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to invite you, because I've heard about other space analog missions, the Austrian Space Forum, DMARS in Israel, Lunaris in Poland, but I hadn't necessarily heard about Chill Ice yet. So, do you have a campaign to make the general public, or even the space bubble that we all seem to operate in a lot, aware of what's going on with Chill Ice specifically?
Yeah, so I believe the main reason why Chill Ice wasn't probably as accessible as it could have been is because we focus really on the proof of concept and the science behind it. There's quite a wide spectrum of analog astronaut missions, going from a bit of a space-themed summer camps to analog astronaut missions that are endorsed by space agencies. And so for us, it was really important to make sure that the scientific quality was there before anything else. And that's why we wanted the proof of concept of the first mission, and really focusing on the quality and setting a high standard for our future research before focusing on the outreach. So this is indeed something we are currently working on, being able to share how cool this project is and how cool astronaut analog missions are in general, and their general potential for space exploration. And so we're doing that through different channels. And yeah, you know, the basics like LinkedIn, Instagram. We have a newsletter also, but it's indeed something we need to work on. So I'm looking forward to your advice and tips, Remco, on that.
Sure. Well, perhaps that's where Lisa can come in as well, to a certain extent, because I know Lisa has done this great video, but beyond the video, and perhaps this is the time, Lisa, for you to introduce yourself and your role in analog missions a little bit further, to see well, how you have done this and why you created that video in the first place.
So interesting, and thank you, Marion, for that really fantastic presentation. It's just visually gorgeous, and really, I think, brings us right into the heart of what you're doing, and in no way to diminish the scientific element, but it just looks so well and so nicely put together. And I think sometimes as technical people, medics, engineers, scientists, we come at this from data. We come at this from the robust structures that we put into experiments, and we think this stands on its own. And the general public doesn't respond well to data. They respond to, beautiful visuals. They respond to emotion. They are story first. And I think you're now at that stage where you're trying to bridge that not that gap, but I suppose to bring people along, to appreciate the achievements and the data through the story and through the visuals and get there. And listening to you, I really want to go to Iceland now in August and see how you're getting on. One thing I think is just so interesting, and I wonder maybe would you be happy to talk about in any depth yourself or Esther, you have an artist in residence, and I think that is a wonderful, I love that he's there, he's part of the core team. Can we talk about that a little bit? Because
yeah, absolutely.
Those storytellers are where you bridge that gap to the general public, and that's so interesting to me.
Yeah, and that was really the whole point, is to be able to have a coherent story for people to relate, also to be inspired and to want to join us on this journey. And indeed, our in-house artist Jesse Forte is an amazing personality. And he has a lot of experience working with different media. He's an artist himself, so he makes music, he makes art, and he has experience in previous analog astronaut missions. And so really our whole aim with Chill Ice is to, now that we've got this solid foundation, this scientific foundation, making sure we can also explore space through different points of views and different lenses. And art is a big one. And so we're indeed thinking also of having an art exhibition in Iceland during the outreach days. So yeah, it's a big focus also, art.
That's really cool. I think so I originally got into this space from a medical perspective. I became really interested in like aviation and aerospace medicine, discovered that unless you were basically a US citizen, it was very difficult to progress in that field. And we set up Space Medicine Ireland, which essentially is a research collaborative. We presented at conferences and, developed our papers and our own research projects separate to space agencies, but, with great mentorship. I'm from UTMB personnel, from people at ICEE, and started publishing there. But then we ended up kind of going down the outreach route nearly accidentally, and probably because of my film background from before. But I just remember talking to friends of mine in medicine firstly, and then in the wider community, who had just no idea how much we owe to spaceflight in terms of developments, technology, or just cool stuff that was happening. But I was like, if you knew about this, you'd be so enthused. And then you notice it's in the national press, but it's, it's 2 paragraphs at the end of a page that no one's reading in technicalese or whatever you want to call it, whatever jargon from whatever specialty you're in. And it's so funny because even when you go to the NASA website, and NASA are fantastic at branding. Like, we all remember those big 90s films with the bombast, and it's sexy and it's cool and it's interesting and there's rockets. But that's really hard to translate when you go to their website and you're like, oh, this is really cool stuff, but you've got to go, deep dive into the technical stuff and then translate that back to people. And sometimes I feel like there's these communication gaps to ordinary people. So I suppose I started making videos. I did one that Remco was talking about for the Royal Aeronautical Society, because I had this open call, and I had only recently finished doing the UTMB Principles of Aerospace Medicine course in Texas. And I thought, God, this stuff is cool. Like, I did not know that people were actually doing astronaut training on this planet. Those opportunities are there, and people can go and grasp them with both hands. And they don't have to be military, they don't have to be, an engineer. They can be a scientist, they can be an artist, they can be a storyteller. And I was like, wow, nobody knows about this. If people know about this, they are gonna, they're gonna go for it. And someone put me onto ICEE Caves, and that was the first time I'd really known about that project. And when you look, I think, I could be emailing ICEE about this, they're missing a trick. Like, this photography is gorgeous. It is beautiful stuff. These are some of the most fabulous images of our planet, and people exploring our planet with real risk, with real danger, with real stakes. There's an amazing story there. And when you go to their Flickr, it's just hundreds and hundreds of beautiful stories and beautiful images. but nobody knows about it. And that's heartbreaking, because any time I've showed this to people, they're like, this exists, this is so cool, how can I do this, how can I get involved? I didn't know caves were pretty, I thought they were damp. Like, so it's just amazing. I feel like that translation gap is something that I am so keen to close. It's so keen to get people excited about, because it is really exciting. And sometimes people are just turned off because they hear a couple of keywords, they hear things and they think, this isn't for me. Maybe I'm not welcome in this space, or this is a technical space, or this is a space for super high achievers and I will not be part of this space. And it's like, no, this is for everybody. There is a role here for everyone. And this is just cool stuff.
If I may, I have a question for you. So did you find that video is the best way for storytelling in that space? Because just putting on websites seem very dry, right?
It's tricky, isn't it? Because you want to reach as many people as you can. Like the video for Royal Aeronautical Society, I think it's 9 minutes, so that's a long time for the internet. So I'm not saying that that's the way to reach everybody. I just think video is so powerful when you have strong visuals. If you have a couple of talking heads people, gray background, and they're talking about this, and they're some people they come alive on camera and some people die on camera, and that's that's a film saying, but like, it is true. And if you have somebody that's going to sound great in a soundbite, or in a 30-second audio clip, brilliant, sell them that way. Or if you just think they've got a great quote, and their stuff is really interesting, but they're not brilliant at communicating it, just put it in quotation marks at the front of your website and make that the focus of the page. And if people are really interested to drill down, have a link to a paper afterwards and the techie stuff afterwards. And like, again, you're not trying to put off people in the scientific community, but those people will find you anyway. We are a self-selected group of space enthusiasts who love this stuff, who thrive on this stuff. And we're going to seek that stuff out because it's a highly motivated core that are there. The trick is to bring everybody else along. And I think if you have 5% of the technical information up front and 95% of here's the cool hook that gets you in here, that brings more people. So I think that's my interest at the moment. And myself and my other half, who's a photographer, are starting work at the moment on a documentary called Analogue. And that's kind of our project for 2022, is to basically looking at Nemo, looking at caves, looking at different analog missions. We'd love to come to Iceland if you'll have us, and just make this stuff look as cool as it is, because it's amazing. It's visually so interesting, and also just showing the people behind the scenes, behind the experiments, the passion, the data, the drive, the doing this in your own time, the late nights, the stress of things, sometimes logistically not going to plan, because that's where the story is. And that's so interesting to people who have no interest in space.
Wow, super cool.
Huge audience there. And also Iceland is just cool, full stop. Everyone, like US, Europe, everyone's like, ooh, Iceland, wow. So I think you have their attention before you say anything. You have their attention, 100%.
So that's a very good point. Iceland is cool. It's great for pictures, but that's probably not the reason why you're going there, Marion.
No, it is. No, joking. It's it is because of the lava tubes. So Iceland is extremely close from Europe, where the founders started this initiative, and lava tubes are indeed the structures that are found on the moon and Mars. And so there's very little research about them, but there's a huge potential for it to be used for future of space exploration and just multi-planetary civilization overall. So yeah, but it is also a great picture opportunity.
Of course, and that's important, as Lisa said, because that was the kind of the hook that brought her into this whole world. And ICEE Caves, I guess, is a good example. ICEE Caves is also something that is to the non-professional eye probably very similar to what you're doing. I mean, caves are not lava tubes, but still they're dark and damp environments. How do you distinguish the Chill Ice mission from that and many other analog missions? What is different about Chill Ice? Why didn't you join one of the others?
Great thing about Chile. So Esther is a geologist. I think Esther will be able to pinpoint specifically the geological differences between caves and lava tubes, and is probably, yeah, the rocks and all of that. But the main interest with Chile's really is the scientific rigor that there is from a broad scape of young professionals. The average age of our team is 25, 30 years old, and it's people who come from a wide variety of backgrounds. So that's really, I'm very new to the space community, and so coming into this mission is just such an opportunity to meet extremely enthusiastic people who have tons of different skills, and who are all passionate about making this mission a reality, and making sure it's accessible, because very easily, as Lisa, you mentioned, it's very easy to think, oh, that's not for me, this is too technical, it's too hard, or I don't have the background. But for example, to become one of our analog astronauts, you need some extreme environment experience, and that could be done in your backyard, or you could have like climbed the Himalayas. So it's a really accessible mission that is focused on multidisciplinarity, and keeps on the scientific rigor and innovation that is needed for space exploration.
Okay, good point. Lisa, you put a lot of effort into telling these stories that you were talking about these missions. Why do you think it's important for the general public to know about all this?
I think it's similar to why we're all interested in space, and obviously I don't want to ascribe my own opinions and views to other people, but I think there's always an aspirational element to space. And I think, as human beings, a core part of our makeup and what makes us different from other animals is this kind of dream quality that we have of wanting to explore, wanting to push boundaries. I mean, really for no good evolutionary reason. Space is dangerous and trying to kill us. Why do we want to go there? Objectively, rationally, it's mad. But it's there. And we have to drive ourselves towards it. So I think there's a commonality, like a human commonality in space, that's just kind of applies to everyone. I think that's why it captures the imagination of, for elderly people to small children. There is something to communicate that is the same for everyone. It brings us all together. So I think for that reason, for me, it's one of the common denominators for all of humanity that people are interested at a base level in. And I just find that really interesting as a species, that we're all looking upwards in that way. So I think that's the main reason. And the second one is that the story of it, pushes all disciplines to exceed what they think they can do. It pushes the boundaries of engineering. It pushes the boundaries of medicine, of architecture, of science. I think it makes all of those people in those fields strive harder to innovate, and then take those innovations back and improve life on Earth. And I just think that's incredible. It's that push and that inspiration together. There is no better story than space.
I mean, I think we all agree with that. Of course, that's probably what many of us, what keeps many of us in the space business and so excited about the space business. But space analogs seem to be the least glamorous part of everything happening in space. So what makes space analogs? I mean, we picked it for a topic today, but what makes space analogs the subject of some of the stuff that you're doing?
They're accessible. They're accessible to people who are not US Navy SEALs, Harvard Medical Board graduates, and that's not to belittle the people who are involved in analogs. They are highly trained, skilled, and enthusiastic, but it allows a wider variety of people. It's only going to be, no matter how much humanity travels to other planets, it's still going to be the preserve of a small number of people, whether the best in their field or the wealthiest around. So the reality is that, to interest the wider community in space, to get the financial backing to keep ESA, NASA, other space agencies going, they have to have the support of a wider amount of let's be honest, voters and taxpayers. So I think analogues are a way to get that buy-in from a wider community. People can visit an analogue, they can participate, they can know more people who are involved, they could potentially, act in a support capacity. So there's more opportunity there. I think that's a huge thing. And secondly, analogues are a proving ground for things that are used in space and a way to develop innovation, in other ways. And I just think that's quite interesting that we can do that in a more cost-effective way on Earth. But I think mainly it's just that wider pool of people and opportunity.
So how do you deal with that, Marion? In your, I mean, you said you're about to go into your astronaut selection process. How does that fit with your selection criteria and the general process of getting out there and find these people that you want to go onto your mission?
Yeah, so we're reaching out to different communities. It's also very important to look at different pools of candidates. The selection criteria is, so there's going to be different steps, of course, from very basic of CV, experience, letter of motivation, and then going on a bit more about scenario analysis and how would we see them fit within a crew, because at the end of the day, just like astronauts, you're not alone in this mission, in this journey. There has to be some good crew dynamics and you're part of the team. So this will be towards the last stages. And yeah, there's no real hard requirements apart from showing potential and being cool-headed. And these are all skills that you can show in different aspects of your life. So it's going to be very interesting actually to assess the different candidates on that and see. Yeah, we're going to be surprised, I think. We're going to have a lot of candidates. Last year, the application was only open for a week and there was over 100 candidates. And now we're opening for a month, knowing that we also have a proof of concept of last year. So yeah, we'll need all hands on deck for that.
Okay. Very interesting question coming in from Dana. Dana, are you able to maybe explain a little bit in person what you mean? Can you unmute and turn your video on perhaps?
Hi.
You've been involved in DMARS, haven't you?
Yes, we've been, DMARS is the Desert Mars Analog Research Station at the Ramon Crater in Israel.
Mhm.
And we've had some successful missions, and the latest one was a collaboration with the Austrian, I forgot, with Olaf for the Amadi 20 mission.
Austrian
that was
Space
here.
Forum.
Thank you, I forgot the word. The Austrian Space Forum. And one of the the issues we had on social media and with people in the space sector was a problem with the phrase analog astronauts. Well, some respond, some were very excited, and some were saying that we are demeaning the word astronaut, since astronauts are trained and chosen and go on a long journey until they become in space, and we are just, using the analog astronauts, and this is not fair. And how do you handle this kind of backlash?
Can I just chime in quickly for 1 second? And it's just, so this is really interesting. And I'm so glad you brought this up, because I watched interviews recently with several different astronauts around this issue. None of them give a toss, firstly, okay? So if actual astronauts are not bothered, you will always have a small number of people who will quibble with you over terminology. It's very hard not to take it personally, I'm sure. But if actual astronauts don't care, I wouldn't either. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
No, I love that. And also, I think actual astronauts don't care that much, but space agencies do, because they do want to be associated to the scientific rigor. And with the current media, it's very easy for anyone to call themselves an astronaut, even though they've never went through the selection, they've never put a foot in space. So it is indeed something we're extremely aware of in CHILICE, and that's why we started more on the scientific side than the outreach side. But as Lisa said, there's always going to be people who will be pointing fingers at this idea and this concept, but really it's about communicating the message of analog astronaut missions, where we know we're not in space, we know we're not doing what astronauts are going through, and following specifically what they're doing. But it is still an accessible way to improve science, and it is still needed. And actually, those analog astronaut missions are rather recent, like they popped up in the last decade or so. And so being able to, you have to start somewhere to be able to set a standard of quality, making sure that the results are reliable and that the people involved join this mission and this journey in order to make sure that, yeah, these are results that can be used for space exploration overall. I think it just needs to be clear that, I mean, that's why analog is the word we're using, because we are simulations. And so as long as this is clear, then we can only just progress and make sure that we are scientifically valid and, you know, have the rigor behind it. But it is indeed a quite highly controversial topic, I think. And there's a lot of astronaut analog missions that have been pointed out for not being too rigorous. And essentially, you just have to pay a high fee in order to get there. So it's it's a process, I think, but it has to start somewhere. Yeah.
So talking about that link to scientific rigor and to and basically to the validity of the whole concept of analog missions, how does CHILICE link into the preparations at space agencies or whoever is involved in preparing missions to the moon and to Mars, because that's ultimately where this information needs to go to in order for them to benefit. How do you guarantee that at CHILICE?
So there's two ways. There's first through the partners we're using and with who we're working with, who are, some of them are developing technology that will be put in future missions and launched. That could be an example with rovers, for example, and Lunar Zebra. And so the research that we're doing, the testing ground of the Icelandic landscape is actually a great opportunity for them to just, test out if their tech works in, of course, terrestrial conditions. So it's not the real deal, but it's better than just testing it in a lab. The second thing is by making sure that our research outputs are being communicated in conferences and making sure that there are researchers and supervisors from different institutes and different universities, and making sure that there's this two-way communication going on where we accept the feedback also if we do need to improve somewhere to be more rigorous. I think that's where outreach comes in. Scientific outreach, at least, is making sure that we are visible and we are accessible and what we're doing has validity by making sure that we have different experts on board with us.
How does it work in the aerospace medicine world, Lisa? How does aerospace medicine relate to, or the findings in aerospace medicine, perhaps through these analog missions, feeding through to, well, all the medical concerns that we may have about missions to the moon and Mars?
Analogs are incredibly valuable from an aerospace medicine perspective, mainly because, you know, the big five hazards for space. One of the biggest ones that's quite difficult to predict is psychological, and in terms of mental health. And I suppose as they're looking at longer and longer missions and more remote locations, so, you know, you're looking at Gateway, you're looking at Artemis, you're looking at Mars missions, the psychological profile of astronauts is going to change. You know, I suppose we were at a test pilot sort of training and military background initially, the Apollo missions, then you move on to more kind of broader scientific basis for ISS. I'm probably going back more towards that military test pilot sort of picture for Mars, just because of the rigors and the duration and the psychological endurance required and just the personal risk you're looking at. So testing people in these, you know, really concentrated environments, adding high fidelity, adding an element of risk, adding time pressure, you know, concentrating these very high achieving interpersonal skill requirements in an enclosed space for prolonged periods. That's huge, because you're self-selecting really healthy people in aerospace medicine anyway. So you're basically focused on risk prevention, but the psychological element is quite difficult, and that's where analogs are a cheaper, less high risk way to test those people out. And I think that's probably the crucial element. The second really interesting element for aerospace medicine around analogs is biometrics and monitoring. So I suppose like on EVAs and, you're looking at lunar mining, asteroid mining, you're looking at longer periods, no longer in microgravity, but in lunar gravity, where you're having, people using tools, occupational injuries, risk of trauma, risk of various illness, decompression illness, so on and so forth, blast injuries, etc. In that context. So you really are testing the monitoring, the remote monitoring, all these systems that are required to keep astronauts safe in those contexts. Because at the end of the day, if you have a trauma or traumatic event for an astronaut on the moon, that's a disaster. That's a personal disaster for that astronaut. It's a disaster for the mission. A medical evacuation is so complex. You're looking at a multi-stage evacuation. It's a real problem. So your focus has to be on preventing these things from happening. If you're able to monitor someone's heart rate, if you have a doctor sitting at a flight desk in JSE or equivalent, and they're able to say, okay, this person is tachycardic, their heart rate is up, we need to take them out of here. They're not managing, or you have haptic sensors on fingers, you can tell, this person's been using these tools for X amount of hours and it's gravity, they're risking nerve damage, etc. You're preventing these problems from causing you major issues, not just personal issues, medical issues, but also the enormous cost value of that if you have an astronaut out of commission, or worse, that they have to be repatriated in a hurry. So all of that stuff, all that monitoring, all that preparation, all that psychological testing, that's incredibly valuable. Because you can't fake risk. Your body just doesn't accept the fakery of it. If you're in a simulation, we do them in medicine, we do them in the military, you really have to put pressure on people in a team, because if someone's going to fall apart, you do not want them to do that in a real emergency in space. So I think that medical aspect for aerospace medicine, adding that pressure and adding that risk in a not quite a safe space, because obviously things in caving, people can die, things can go terribly wrong, but your body accepts the fact that there's real risk. But also if things do go terribly wrong, you have a team just outside the cave to take them away. So you just kind of have that safety net and that testing process. So from a medical perspective, analogs are up there most valuable tools you have.
I guess not just from a medical point of view, also and you mentioned before, from a psychological point of view. And maybe
Yeah.
Claudia, this is a good bridge to your story, because you are using the astronaut model in a completely different way to train people who are not necessarily going to the moon or to Mars, but use the same learnings for other purposes. But perhaps this is a good time for you to explain what you're doing.
Thank you, Remco. Thank you. Hi from my side. With the astronaut in GmbH, well, first of all, our goal was, or still is, to bring the first female German astronaut into space. But from the astronaut training we developed for that, and from my passion for space and for Mars, we developed the small Mars analog mission. I can just show you one picture here of the summary, which we use now as a space startup company, which we are. Actually, we developed the stuff under the funding of the ESA Business Incubator. And we use it now for commercial trainings, for leadership trainings and management trainings. So we have a mobile Mars base, we have mobile Mars walls and a Mars floor that we can bring to any location. Basically, we need about 200 square meters location, and we build up a Mars scenario in a Mars base. And we build up a ground station in another room, and then we do a 1.5 day simulation of a Mars mission with a team of up to 14 people. But with the goal to build their team capabilities, to build their leadership and their communication skills. We've developed it together with a former astronaut trainer from ESA. So we have real procedures, we have real, well, we don't have real astronaut suits, but we have very good astronaut suits. The helmets were, by the way, made by the Austrian Space Forum. So we're also cooperating with them. The first concept was made by Liquifer, by Barbara Imhoff, who probably some of you know as well. And I just wanted to make you aware of it, because that's another form of analog missions. It's of course a short-term mission, but our goal is also I mean, my vision is always to bring space out into the world, to all the people in the non-space field. And that's what we do with it. And at the same time, hope to create some profit. We actually have up to now only trained it with students. We didn't do a commercial one because of the COVID situation where we couldn't get the people together in a room. So if you're ever interested in a short-term Mars mission, we can pack everything and come wherever you want us to be.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Claudia. And you know, the thing that I like about it, except that I of course like the slightly different view on organizing space analog missions, is that it also provides a business model to well, to help fund other elements of what your organization is trying to achieve. So I really like that by involving people who would normally not necessarily be involved in these missions, creating awareness, but also creating a business model underneath your own initiative at the same time. So I think this could actually be an example. Not that I want any competition for you, Claudia, but this could be a good example for certain other organizations to do similar things in their part of the world. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, you find more information on it, of course, on our webpage, www.astronautin.net.
Okay, perhaps you can throw that in the chat as well.
It's in the chat, yeah.
Can look that up. So, Marion, I'd like to go back to something that you mentioned just between the lines, and that's about outreach days. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that is and why you do that?
Yeah, so I mean, as we probably all agree on, the outreach is just crazy important. And also it's a really good way to wrap up the mission, to be able to show and reiterate what was the point of the mission and what is the overall vision. And why did we all work multiple months on this thing? And so once the mission is finished, which means that the analog astronauts have wrapped up their scientific experiments and that they're not living anymore in the lava tube. So once this is done, there's going to be 1 or 2 days post-mission still on site in Iceland, where we're going to have our partners, some partners come in, but also anyone who wants to see what we're up to once we finish the more scientific, because during the mission it's quite hectic, so we can't really have people coming in and out. But those 2 days are really dedicated for the just general audience to see what an analog astronaut mission is, and specifically at Chile what we're doing. So getting partners in, also getting local Icelandic people interested in what we're doing. And this year we're going to have an art exhibition.
Oh, that's very cool. You mentioned that, but I'm really looking forward to that. Is there anything that we can see? I mean, if we're not able to travel to Iceland, is there anything we will see from that online as well?
Yeah, we're still planning it, and indeed a hybrid format is definitely the best. Also because with the lava tube situation and how it's quite dangerous to get inside, it's always better to have a hybrid format where you could access it remotely. So as soon as we have everything settled down, I'll reach out to you, Remco, and you can share it. And that'll be great if you guys, everyone here can be involved with it. Or even if you have any ideas, yeah, feel free to message us and just, yeah, get involved, really. That'd be cool.
Absolutely, we'd love to. So Lisa, any tips for them on how to organize these outreach days, or how to organize these outreach during the mission specifically?
I think the biggest one is to front load your work, I think. And it sounds really prosaic and quite dull, but when, you know, the last few weeks before you actually launch the mission, just the logistics are going to be overwhelming. It's a bigger project than you've done before. You know, there's more technical rigor. There's more experiments going. So you're just gonna have so much last minuteness of that. So just the tech stuff of it, you're doing a hybrid conference or hybrid outreach day for the first time, just to try and front load all of that work beforehand and have your kind of dates planned for your scheduling your Twitter posts, scheduling your, you know, everything that can be eased or automated to try and do that as quickly, you know, really as soon as possible. Because I suppose what people find is that they're really coming up to it, and then what falls off the end is the outreach, or the promotion side of it, because people just don't feel like they have time. And obviously the science is really, really crucial and really important to get right, and there's always unforeseen things that need to be dealt with. So I find that scheduling, or pre-programming to have your content done, like if you're having artists doing an exhibition, get them to do their own, as much of the legwork as possible in terms of the promotion, give them dates, give them times for posts, a schedule that goes out, so everybody knows well in advance when they're meant to be promoting, when the key dates are, so that that document or a Google Drive or whatever is accessible to everyone, so that you don't have to be poking people, supervising people, close to the date when you're overwhelmed with everything else. So I think that would be my biggest takeaway from things that I've organized myself, is just to automate as much as possible, and to delegate the promotion to the people who are key and core, of their own work. And if you have people that you feel might need a little bit of assistance in terms of how best to communicate what they're doing, get them to send you stuff months ahead. Find what their core message is, or their core takeaway is, and how best they communicate that, whether that's in writing, whether that's in video, what their own media links are if they have them, who they are comfortable approaching, who they are good to approach, and who you feel would represent you well to whom. And just be cognizant of the different levels of skill sets, or the different contact levels or comfort, and who you can use in that sense. So I just get that plan together, and just see what people are happy to bring to the table on that, and what they're happy to do independently, because the more that they're able to do independently in terms of promotion ahead of schedule, it eases things up for you. And then in terms of the art exhibition and everything, artists are amazing. Obviously, when they're empowered to communicate their work, they will do it for you. They will really promote it really well. But if they feel that they are an add-on, if they're not, crucially engaged at an early stage, so I would have your meetings, your artist in residence, can he coordinate these people? Can they draw on art world connections, promotions, cross promotions? Is there, when they're looking at the experiment list, do they have access to what you guys are doing? Do they have access to that information? They should have. Is there anything in there that, I know a lot of engineers who are artists, architects who are artists, who would be really fascinated by some of the experiments that are ongoing. Give them that information. Is there something there that they think, God, that's fascinating, maybe I could incorporate that into my art? How can I communicate this data, these results, through my art? And can I communicate that to an arts community that maybe previously would have no knowledge of this area? And making those connections early, so that they can feel part of the team. Firstly, there's nothing worse than coming to the end of a program and being handed a load of information and say, promote this. If they're not stakeholders, if they're not involved, they won't own it in the same way. And artists are so passionate and so proud of what they're doing. If they're really crucially involved, I think those people could be your biggest cheerleaders.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I'd like to add, because I've been involved in some of the some of the Austrian Space Forum missions, and one of the reasons why they are particularly well known in this field, just like ESA Caves, just like High Seas, perhaps to a slightly lesser extent, is the quality of the pictures. Because the images, yes, they are amazing, but these pictures are made by very professional photographers that they've hired specifically for that purpose. This is not just one of the team members taking snaps with their phone. No, these are professional photographers that were hired, or professional videographers even, that provide much higher quality work than any of your student volunteers. Not knowing them, so I may be wrong, but most student volunteers could not deliver, and that might be something to think about as well, and also set aside time in the plan that Lisa just explained, in that rigorous planning that well, you know much more about than I do, for these missions, is to set time aside for these professional PR photos, because both on ESA Caves and on the Amity missions, there have been amazing pictures that even I use, although I'm not involved in these missions, for my outreach about space, just because the quality of the pictures and the story that these images can tell, if they're taken by a good photographer,
Mm.
can do so. So yeah,
Yeah.
probably worth
So
thinking
uh,
about.
last mission, we did have some photographers, some really talented photographers, and that's probably why you see that the images, they're really cool. The landscape is indeed helping, but the quality is there, and that's definitely thanks to them. But indeed, one feedback we got from them is that there wasn't enough time scheduled in the mission to take those photographies. So it wasn't really coordinated. And as the photographer, you will have a lot of material that actually can't be used if it's not properly planned out in advance. So that's definitely something we're taking into account for this mission. And so from both your experience, Remco and Lisa, I was curious, do you know, did you experience more engagement from the audience depending on the type of outreach you did?
I would say so, absolutely. I mean, I can be very briefly about this. Yes, if you have good quality material to work with, then
Mhm.
yes, the engagement grows. It's simple as that. Lisa, I don't know about you.
Absolutely. I think that the higher the quality, the better. We have a saying in film that sound is 60% of a film. Like people will watch a grainy picture for longer than they listen to crap sound. They just won't tolerate it. It's it's a real black and white thing. And if your images or your sound or your photography is not up to scratch, like everyone is used to watching incredibly slick, well branded, really well presented stuff on social media, on YouTube, on TV. Everything has to be broadcast quality. And that sounds unfair. Because sometimes they're like, oh, it's the science. I totally understand that. No, it has to match the best of what's out there to really grab people. Otherwise, all you're getting are the people who are willing to persist, the self-selected people who are already interested. You won't reach new people. And that sounds harsh, but it is just true. So the branding, to be consistent, to be catchy, to have a really core message, and to keep it consistent across all channels and all press releases and everything like that, and just to make it look slick. If you make it look slick, everyone will be interested. The message secondary sounds terrible, but if it doesn't, it's like the sound thing. If it doesn't look good, if it doesn't sound good, people will turn it off. There's data on this. Within, I think it's 18 to 20 seconds, people will persist with picture that's not quite up to scratch. It's like 7 seconds for sound. That's the average turn off on YouTube. So you have to make it look good. If it's not good enough to be on TV, scrap it.
Yeah,
Better to have 30 seconds of really, really good stuff than 10 minutes of, oh, it's okay. You just get better engagement.
well, those are amazing tips. Thank you, Lisa. That's exactly why we do these sessions. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of the hour, and thanks to our audience, and especially thanks to you, we've been able to have a very lively and very useful conversation about this. So I would like to thank you both very, very much for your insights. I'm really looking forward to seeing the Chill Ice mission materializing this summer and seeing how the preparations are going. So please keep us in the loop. Same for you, Lisa. It sounds very exciting, the stuff that you're doing this year on this documentary that you're making. And I really hope that
I might get
we
Marion's email off you, Remco, in case
Yeah.
she's up for being featured in Analogue the documentary.
I mean, absolutely. I was
Also,
gonna
I've never been to
actually-
Iceland, and lava tubes just look really
Well,
cool.
here you go. Perfect opportunity. We'll give you a
There you
tour.
go.
But I wanted to say thank you also for the audience. And there's been some really interesting conversation going on in the chat. So I'm sorry I wasn't able to answer. But if you do want to be involved also with the science communication side of our mission, like please do message us because we'd love to have a chat with you. So yeah, thank you everyone.
Well, thank you very much. And last but not least, before we all leave, join us next week for Impulse 2022. Check out our website, powering.space, for the annual Space Outreach Conference. So I hope to see you all there. And for now, I wish to thank you very much for attending. And please stay in touch if you want to continue this conversation on social media or on email, then you know how to find us. So thank you very much, and we'll hopefully see you next week, and otherwise we'll see you next month at our next Lunch and Learn. So thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.